is going on, everyone? Welcome to episode 213 of Littleroot Lessons. As always, I'm your host, Carter Noble, joined by our fantastic co-host, Jay. And we have a special guest today. We have Josh Wong with us as well, probably better known online as Kuriboh. What's going on, guys?
I'm doing great. How are you guys doing?
Even better
Um,
that you did so well at Vancouver,
yeah,
man.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
That was a massive dub for the community for sure.
Yeah,
Happy to have you on as well.
I thought the first time I'd be on here would be for a Littleroot invitation. I didn't expect a day two of regionals.
I mean, we all of us actually met last year at Knoxville. So, and I mean, Josh, we've known you for ever as a part of the community. You've been around since like our first draft league we ran back in like 2020. Like you've been a long-standing member of the community for a very long time. So obviously it's great to finally have you on, and in the circumstances that you're here, being your fantastic finish at Vancouver this past weekend feels appropriate to have you here. So I guess we should probably go ahead and just start talking about the team here. Do you wanna do a little bit of a breakdown here of what we got going on?
Yeah,
Yes,
absolutely.
please talk us through the team a little bit.
Alright, so the origins of the team go back to Knoxville of this year, actually. Logan Missouri. Sorry, dude, if you're listening to this and I mispronounced your last name, but he took the same six to a 25th place finish, and I didn't know it at the time, but my friend Jean-Marc, he is a local for me, and coincidentally, he placed ninth at Vancouver, and he took the same squad to a locals of ours, and I was just running. I think it was more Incineroar balance at the time, and between seeing his squad and seeing another one of our locals running Garden Fire, I saw it and I was like, okay, this thing is good. I need to start looking into this. And so I did, and this build is eventually what I settled on. But for I want to say about a month before Vancouver, I was actually on Corviknight instead of King Gambit, and that was super fun. And Corviknight definitely has its niche, but I thought it was kind of missing something, so I ended up going with the King Gambit to punish Intimidate even harder. The rest of the squad, I think a lot of people will have seen it before at one point or another. Chien Pao, of course, is Chien Pao. It's been a staple since it came, being able to debuff defense on everything, which lets Gouging Fire hit harder, lets Ogerpon hit harder. And just other thing, Gouging Fire Ogerpon, such an amazing combo. Like it's been well established that Howl can just make Ogerpon hit so much harder, and just in general typing is is just great synergy in there. And then finally, we have the Land of Torn. Again, it's a combo a lot of us have seen before. Not many people were running Sandseer. Most people were running Substitute, and I was on Substitute for the longest time. But a couple weeks before Vancouver, Jean-Marc convinced me, hey, Sandseer might feel a little weird, but it opens up a ton of aggressive options, and it can really help in some specific matchups. He actually did end up going with the substitute for his build, but I decided to trust him, stick with Sancio, and see how it goes. And because, especially since I was running the Rain Dance on the Torn, in which most other builds I think have been going for Protect instead, I decided to stick with Rain Dance because one, it can power up the Ogerpon, it can help protect the King Gambit, and it lets Sancio hit for 100%. And of course,
yeah,
there's Bleak Wind on top of that. So there's a lot of like little decisions there that changed in other variations of the team. I ended up in because I ended up copying this team. I was a little adjacent to a building group consisting of a couple of Toronto players and John Mark himself. And yeah, I think the squad as a whole performed pretty well. I think Logan himself was at, well, I know he was there himself at Vancouver, and I think he performed about 5-4. And I think out of the squad, that might have been the team's lowest placing. I think a couple of others went 6-3, and Jean-Marc, of course, having an amazing finish at ninth.
Yeah, I'm looking at John Mark's team as well here, and like one thing that is, I mean, the teams actually differ quite a bit, despite having 5 of the 6 same Pokemon. But you know, you brought up like how you're running Sandsear over Substitute. John Mark dropped that Tornadus mode and actually put, you know, has Rillaboom on his squad instead. So like the Substitute makes more sense on his team than it
Yeah,
does
I
on
agree.
yours, because you have that Rain Dance mode that you can bring, which I like a lot. I think I brought it up last week when talking about your team. It really helps with not only the Landorus mode, but your Ogre mode as well. Instead of getting a Howl boost, you can just get a Rain boost and start taking KOs that way. And like defensively as well, it helps a lot with your Chien Pao and your King Gambit against Pokemon like Arcanine and Incineroar and Chi-Yu, for example. Was that like something that you saw? Was the rain dance like a big benefit in your run?
It definitely came up. I think there were definitely a couple of cases where I used it to protect the King Gambit. I don't think I used it to boost Ogerpon too much. It did end up somewhere in my calcs that Ogerpon boosted did help in some matchups. I the I think the most common use throughout the tournament, at least, was making sure that I take RNG out of the picture when I need to get Sandsears down.
The so again, I have John Mark's team pulled up here as well, and I noticed there's a few differences in like Terra's as well. He's running Terra Fairy on King Gambit, whereas you have Terra Dragon. And then your Landorus, you have Steel versus typically what is pretty commonly the more common type of Terra Poison on Landorus. Do you want to talk about that some as well?
Yeah, sure. Terra Steel. Honestly, in hindsight, I'd probably just go back to Poison. I the benefit of Terra Steel is well, I guess they both were just fairy, but I kind of liked it in concept because it brings about the same defensive play that you can get out of King Gambit, just having the rain dance protect you more. I and also being able to take ice moves better was a big benefit because you know, you'll see the snow team, but more importantly the Chien Pao that sometimes you just want to take a little bit better. But in hindsight, I think I I noticed most people trending towards steel for a little bit, but I think most Lando players are settling on poison because they're realizing that being able to take the fighting hit better is more important. But of course, that's team dependent. I think I'll probably trend back that way, but we'll see. As for the Terra Dragon on King Gambit, I think that was just comfort because that that was just what I ran. I think most of my friends were running Terra Fairy instead, and I just never thought of it. Terra Dragon's nice, and it's mostly for any Ogre variation. Being able to take that type core really well is important, and also it's very relevant for Incin and Rillaboom. A lot of the more balancey type stuff. It doesn't really. It helps against Urshifu if they're scarfed, but you the better ones will usually play the pivot game with it, so it still gets tough regardless. I think Terra Fairy is just because it's a good consistent defensive typing and it's covering for that fighting weakness, which does come up a ton.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
know.
that's really fair.
I've been playing the James Evans version of like this gouging fire King Gambit Ogre Pawn Landorus team, and the Terra on King Gambit there is Dragon too, and I found that it more than does the job. And like with Terra Steel, I know towards like the Utrecht regional, like that was really trending on the Landorus around then. Another question that I had for you was like, since I have been playing this team, like something similar to this team, one thing that I have noticed is that the Tailwind matchup with the James Evans team can be really rough at times. You obviously have a Tailwind mode of your own on this squad. How was Tornadus just overall on this team? I feel like when I use Tornadus in teams, it's inconsistent when I bring it. A lot of the time, I'm kind of clicking Tailwind, and then that's kind of it. It just sits there. I know Bleakwind Storm spam is nice, but it's also inconsistent. You have the Rain Dance to fix it. Like, how did you feel about Tornadus overall in this tournament?
I I definitely agree with a lot of the observation on Tornadus. Like, it's good until it isn't. And
Yeah.
yeah, like Bleakwind Storm is fantastic, and I knew from playing Corviknight that I wanted some type of flying coverage on the team, and I do think, at least in the mirror, Tailwind is absolutely gives you the edge. I think in other matchups, however, there's probably something better out there for maybe some of the other things you would want out of Tornadus that you don't consistently get. Like, for example, the one thing I struggled against a lot over the course of Vancouver was Scarf Rapid Strike Urshifu. Like, I saw it sort of like trending back into the format after it was away for a little while, but I wasn't too comfortable with any adjustments I made, so I kind of just stuck with the Tornadus. And yeah, it can be good into the Urshifu either by letting your team outspeed it or just trying to take it out itself with Bleakwind. But it's an 80% move, so it doesn't always hit, and even spread move, like if they Terra, it's still not gonna be quite enough. I do like Tornadus for the bulk I put into it, and having taunt, especially with the covert cloak, did come up more than once. There was a game in day 2 where I was looking at this Amoonguss and realizing, yeah, that's kind of a problem, especially since I think the more recent Amoonguss have been running Sludge Bomb for the extra damage on the Ogre, so I can't follow me away the spores as freely. So having something like Tornado for the utility is still really really useful. I do think that James Evans' build, and actually the build that most of the group was using, they most of them had dropped Tornadoes for Rillaboom as well, and it's definitely there for a reason. And also, like having Grassy Glide was something I hadn't thought of, but in hindsight, seeing Rapid Strike come back in the way it has is definitely making me at least consider putting that in the slot and going with everybody else.
Yeah, the Rillaboom is just like the all-encompassing answer to the Scarf Urshifu. You just click Grassy Glide and they don't move, especially like the Terra Water ones. But we did see in the tournament, I believe it was on the second place team, Brady's team. His Urshifu was Terra Steel. So like that's also something that's kind of trending on the Urshifu, which makes the Rillaboom mode not as consistent into that. Um, yeah, the other main difference on your team between like the Evans team here is the GM Pow over the Flutter main. So you have like a ton of physical options here. I mean, you replace the Rillaboom with the Tornadus, and you have the Landorus still. Um, I obviously Chien Pao is a great Pokemon. Do you think that like the Chien Pao, the Sword of Ruin boosts onto your King Gambits and onto your Ogre Pawns and onto your Gouging Fire was like extremely impactful, like worth the slot over the Flutter Mane?
I I think it definitely was. The bigger thing I noticed with Chien Pao is being able to pressure opposing Landos. That ended up being super
Hmm.
important.
Hmm.
It in the mirror and in general, like this team, you got to be able to play around the Lando really well, and Chien Pao just does that more consistently than Fluttermane.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
the fact that you're going to be able to outspeed them, very consistently and just pressure them that way makes a ton of sense.
yeah,
And like in the event that they have like tailwind up, but you don't, you still have like Sucker Punch to be able to pressure them. If they're this Terra Steel variant, you have Sacred Sword as well, and like Ice Spinner just does a ton of damage into everything as well. So yeah, it makes a ton of sense there.
absolutely. It also just benefits off of Hal, so you can end up putting in a ton of damage output in and of itself. And it also being so fast and being able to hit so hard means you can even push Roger Pawns with it. So I I definitely think like over the course of all the iterations of the team, Chien Pao and Flutter were kind of fighting over that slot. It definitely makes sense because Flutter is just a great special offensive thing. But Chien
Fluttermane
Pao,
is Fluttermane, understandable.
yep. But Chien Pao, I think, has better synergy with the squad.
Yeah, I think having these physical attackers in like Ogre Pawn, Gouging Fire, King Gambit, it makes a ton of sense to have that sort of ruin boost there for them. And talking about like your team versus John Marks, um, they have the Rillaboom as well, which is just another physical attacker for this team to be able to pressure with Chien Pao as well. Getting that priority spam makes a ton of sense next to it, but I really like the idea of having this like rain dance and then just these double storm moves into your opponents and just like knocking them out. Having that versatility of just like changing your form of offense in a way as opposed to, hey, I have five physical attackers, please don't intimidate me.
I wanted to bring up the Corviknight mode that you were talking about earlier on.
Yeah, let's
Yeah.
talk about Corviknight.
Because gouging fire Corviknight is something that I've heard a couple of people talk about. It's something that I've been interested in. Is the main reason why you didn't bring the Corviknight and instead brought the King Gambit because like King Gambit strictly punishes the Intimidate better than Corviknight? Like the mirror armor obviously is going to reflect it away, which doesn't really help your partner too much. But it like when you're reflecting it onto like let's say Incineroar, it's very easy for them to just kind of parting shot out. When on the other hand, like King Gambit takes that and is like, all right, now I'm boosted, and now your life is going to be really really tough.
I I think the reasoning why I switched off of Corviknight wasn't so much that because yes, Defiant can punish the Incineroars and it can even scare away opposing people from bringing it overall because you you see some people see the Kingambit and it's like, oh, I don't want to give you the free boost. I'm just going to leave my Incineroar on the bench, and that's just all the better for me because then my physical attackers can run with it. The most important thing I wanted to do with Corviknight when I was running it was having that boosted flying move because that lets me do a lot uh, into opposing Ogerpon. It as I started playing with it more, I realized my own Gathering Fire, my own Ogerpon can kind of do the job as it is. So Corviknight was seeing like less value, and the other big thing that I was put onto Corviknight for was the Ursaluna Fergraf matchup because Corviknight's super bulky, and between Roost and Iron Defense Body Press, which is what I was running when I started out with it, it was able to just tank Blood Moon, which was insane.
Yeah.
And but at the end of the day, it did have a little bit of All My Friends Are Dead syndrome.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah, that too.
which AV King Gambit was let me be a little bit more proactive, even in that Blood Moon mode, even though I couldn't just stall it out with Roost. So King Gambit, I definitely think was a good call. I don't think Corviknight is bad by any means. I think in a lot of ways, King Gambit's at least more intuitive. I wouldn't be surprised if I saw Corviknight perform well on a variation of this in an upcoming regional or even an IC. But for me, I think I definitely don't regret switching over to King Gambit.
Was the Corviknight, like, did they still have the Tornadus on that team, or was it something different?
Nah, the Corviknight was there, and I was swapping between things like having a Raging Bolt because Raging Bolt's just good, and even thinking like Amoonguss would be good because again, Amoonguss is good.
Yeah, I don't disagree there. Carter might disagree or just not like it.
I don't want to talk about it.
No one likes to talk about it, but it's always there.
Yeah.
You got to talk about Amoonguss. That Pokemon is very, very strong. And you obviously tech the taunt onto the Tornadus to deal with the Amoonguss a little bit better. Yeah, despite saying that, only 2 Amoonguss made Top Cut, which is 3 actually. I lied. So it did well. There's just so much competition for grass types in this format. I mean, between like the Ogerpon and the Rillabooms and all that. The Raging Bolt is an interesting thought on this team, like with the double dragons stuff and some extra priority spam on it.
Yeah, it's also a more aggressive check into the opposing rapid strikes, which again, I definitely, my big takeaway from this regional, and yeah, you're starting to see a trend a couple weeks before it, is that rapid strike is back in full force, which even with Raging Bull around, it's like people have figured out how to protect their rapid strikes against Raging Bull. So it's back in the format. I don't think it's going anywhere anytime soon because it's still very hard to play against. And it's found its way. It found its way back in the face of rapid strikes and Wellspring Ogerpons and everything.
Yeah, we talked about that actually pretty in depth last week, talking about how rapid strike versus single strike is really making a change because there for about a month it seems like single strike was really going to be the popular Urshifu moving forward, and rapid strike can't be held down. The wet noodle bear is too good, man.
Who would have thought that multi-hit water moves are really, really good?
Multi-hit water moves that always crit
and go through protects.
It's not hard to see why this thing is good.
you don't have like the sash counterplay to it anymore. It just eats for breakfast, and that water take damage is just so strong.
Yeah, I might have to go back to Rocky Helmet Corviknight because that was fun.
Yeah, honestly, like Rocky Helmet Amoonguss, Rocky Helmet Corviknight, like Rocky Helmet Tornadus, even.
Yeah, that's it's crazy you say that. Rocky Helmet was the 7th most played item this weekend, behind Wellspring Mask.
Oh that's amazing.
Yeah, there's 31% of teams had a Rocky Helmet on them, with the most common mons being Amoonguss, Tornadus, and Didi, and then a bunch of Tingloos for some reason.
Yeah, well, because Tinglu can eat those rapid strike hits.
Yeah, and
It
Yeah,
just
and
especially
its typing
like
makes it
after
a
Terra.
great target for a very attractive target until it tears.
I
Man,
like
now I have to go
Tinglu.
look at Tinglu data.
Yeah, it's mostly on like these solo dozo gouging fire teams. Like, uh, those teams are a little freaky.
Yeah,
Um,
I played against a couple on ladder. I don't remember if I ever ran into it during the tournament. I don't think I did.
by the looks of it, it does not look like you ran into it. But I think that's a good segue over into. Do you want to talk about the run? Do you want to talk about the different teams that you faced and what matchups were not so great, what matchups were great? And the difference between like day one and day two as well. Day two is an intimidating environment, and it really is just a different vibe all overall. So
Yeah, it
I would love
was
to hear.
really crazy how different day two was. But yeah, we can go in order. So my first round was against Maheen Thacker again. Dude, if you end up seeing this, I am so sorry. And he was playing Tornado actually, and instead of going for a Gouging Fire core, it was just Instant Amoongus Urshifu Flutter. So very standard stuff. Um, the one thing that came up in this matchup, which I had done a calc for a week before just because I was curious, was checking to see if Lando Earth Power could KO a Rapid Strike Urshifu. And I found out that the answer was mostly yes, but depending on the amount of investment, that can really change. And actually, little spoiler, that does come up later. But for this first matchup, it wasn't spec for it. So when I sent an Earth Power its way just to get a feeler for it, and it knocked it out, I was like, okay, cool.
Neat. we will take those.
Most threatening thing on the board down, and then the rest of it was just sort of. I just kind of outpositioned. There was one moment in game two where I made the choice to trade Ogerpon for Urshifu, and ended up being quite worth it. And then just having Lando Torn and Gouging Fire was able to just sort of help win the mirror. Like I'm actually a little surprised in hindsight that I didn't bring Chin Power at all in the face of Torn and Lando, but Ogerpon, especially with the Howl booster too, just does the job as it is because I think most Ogerpons are and should outspeed Landos. Like I don't think with Lando being in the position it is this format that you can afford to underspeed it. And my Ogerpon, like many others, was spec to do that. It's a little bit faster. I think I never liked the bulky Ogerpon spread. Like I definitely get why it's there, but even back in Toronto last fall, I was just personally way more used to a fast Ogerpon. And I think that's definitely the norm now.
Yeah, I find the bulky Overpond spread to be just a little underwhelming, like both damage wise and in terms of like survivability too. I mean, it doesn't take those sludge bombs incredibly well before Terra, and you really want to be able to go and say, okay, on this turn, I'm just gonna click the Ivy Cudgel or the Horn Leech or the Wood Hammer, whatever you're running, and just absolutely take the Landorus or the Urshifu Rapid Strike off the board right away.
Yeah. And that was really all there was to say about round one. So moving on to round two, I have my first heart attack of the day.
Okie dokie.
Yeah, Okie doki's not the scary part.
Latios.
Okie dokie Latios. Latios was actually super interesting. I was very impressed at how it was panning out. So this Latios was Ice Beam Luster Purge. So it was set up to be a Lando killer.
Yeah.
And
get you before and after Terra.
Yeah, and I learned this about Okidogi just playing against him on ladder. Yeah, you scare away the Incineroars with it, but you can't do much against Breaking Swipe. Like,
Yeah.
I was just looking at it like, I think I just clicked breaking swipe here, and it does nothing. And that's exactly what I did with the Okie Dokie. The weird thing I remember, it didn't register when I looked at the team sheet. But I think like 3 or 4 rounds later, I was thinking back to the matches like, why was that there? And the thing I was thinking about was that it was a poison bug Okie Dokie. I don't even remember what that does.
It was Terrabug.
No, it was poison barb, the item.
Yeah, poison barb
Poison barb. I was
for just boosted poison jet. Yeah, looking at this team sheet,
boosted. I wasn't even thinking about the item. I was like, I don't know why they would be running that. Like, I just assumed it was Assault Vest. Like,
no, we are poison jab, hard press, drain punch, protect.
That's another thing. I had no idea what hard press did. It was like,
it is the steel type move similar to like Eruption, where it's based off of your HP.
No. It's not Eruption. It's Ring Out. So it's based off of the
target's
target's
HP. Of their HP.
It's based off the target's HP?
Yeah.
Oh, how about that? I didn't know that.
Right?
I thought it was the other way around.
Its power varies between 1 and 100 and is greater the more HP the target has. So it's like whatever percent they're at is the base power?
Yeah.
Just
this move is weird.
Why aren't you just like running gunk shot at that point, right? Like 120 base power, stab, poison barb boosted. Like you probably pick up your flutter mains that way. I don't like the only reason I can see hard press is for Fluttermane, and it's like,
yeah, it's
why?
This team is also Lumberry Latios. Thunderwave? Like that's
Spore?
Spore makes sense, but like you also outspeed Amoonguss and just pressure with like Luster Purge and or Ice Beam.
Yep.
Like if they Terra Water, Luster Purge is still gonna do a large chunk into them. Like I don't.
Yeah, and like weird choices aside, they definitely played super well. The game one, I made a mistake that I think as a player, over the course of the tournament, I think it was the one thing as a player that I think I really grew into, and I didn't really feel it until it came up in this tournament. In that, one thing I've heard from some of my locals friends is I used to play too safe. I wasn't really trying to read much, and that's something that I think definitely grew in this tournament. And the first instance was against in the game one that I actually lost because you have the flutter in front of you. It's choice backed. It's locked into Gleam. I have my King Gambit, and I say, okay, if I just sucker punch you here, then you die. So you're probably not going to do that. You're probably going to go for a switch. He doesn't switch. I lose my King Gambit because it's Terra, and I lose game one because of it. So it's like I get a little bit of info. The other big piece of info that I got from game one, just on observation, was that the Latios, as much as it was built to be a Lando killer from its moveset, it definitely showed in its spreads as well because I expect my Ogerpon to, as many do, outspeed the Lando, but I went a little bit further just in case to try to catch some of the other Ogerpons that were trying to just speed creep it by one, and it outsped the Latios, even though naturally Latios can hit 110. So it should be able to outspeed Ogerpon in most cases, unless it's not max speed. And that's one thing I noticed. It wasn't super relevant in terms of the 1v1, but it was something that could have been really important later on, and it ended up being so. The game two, however, is when the aforementioned heart attack happened. So again, it's I end up with a King Gambit versus Flutter situation. And it's another situation where it's like, okay, if I click Sucker Punch, Flutter is going to be very, very sad. It clicks Perish Song. And then I start to realize, oh, wait, I am on a timer now. And, but thankfully, while I was sort of panicked in the moment, I really had to be sort of hyper aware of the situation because the Latios was still there, which meant my Lando, even though I think I had teared it at the time, I wasn't too safe, and I knew there was Incineroar in the back, so I knew, okay, to stall out Song, you have the Protect, you have the Fake Out, and either way, you still have the Flutter that I have to deal with at some point. So thinking of more of a proactive mindset, I had to think, okay, it was just a whole sort of puzzle I had to figure out into the end because I had to really play aggressive, and I just had to sort of figure out how to get all the pieces out faster than the Parasong would kill me. So the thought process I'm going through there is, okay, you're locked into Parasong, you have to switch. If I attack into that slot with an Earth Power instead of a Sludge Bomb, then the instant in the back just dies. And then whether Latios protects or not, I can still attack into it with the King Gambit, and either it goes down now or it goes down a turn later. I get the call exactly right. The instant goes down, the Latios protects, and then I'm free to beat the Flutter and the Latios, and then I'm able to get out of the Parasong matchup, and I still had 2 turns to spare. So then after I calmed down a bit for that, I realized, okay, he really likes bringing the Latios because he likes a Tailwind, and he likes threatening Lando. He's bought Okidogi both times as well because he likes the poison coverage. I realized that since Latios doesn't have a dragon move, Gouging Fire just doesn't care.
Yeah, just sit in front of it and ignore it.
Yep. So my one note for Game 3 is just click Breaking Swipe. And it worked.
Just over and over and over again.
Yeah.
I feel like his Latios must have been. It's a little weird that you keep bringing it over and over again because like your Landers specifically is really well positioned into that Latios
beating Latios, yeah.
Because it's like, all right, your Ice Beams aren't effective anymore. Your Luster Purges aren't very effective. Your Poison moves aren't very effective. Like, what are you really doing? Especially once I get my Breaking Swipes going and get your Okidogi shut down, and your Drain Punches are doing barely anything at that point too.
Yeah.
That's when they click hard press into you.
It's one of those ones where after you tell it, they kind of just have a non-aggression pact with each other. You just kind of have to hit the other slot as much as you can.
Yeah, you just sit there and let them chill, and then all my friends are dead until your Landers is sitting there for the rest of the game. The only issue with their Terra is they were probably Terra Steel, and you literally can't touch their Latios, but they can at least, in the long run, take you down over time. So
Yeah.
it was a little bit more pressing on your end, but Gouging Fire is Breaking Swipe, despite its low power, is an absolutely broken move.
Yep.
And Guard Dog is not an all-out, amazing ability outside of strictly Intimidate. So
it's kind of in the same spot as Corviknight, where it works as an Intimidate deterrent, but the Pokemon itself has to bring out some kind of additional value outside of that. And like, I like Okidogi in concept, but I've never been able to get it to work.
Yeah, the Assault Vest sets are like really, really cool with Upper Hand, on it, because you just use that to shut down Rillabooms and Incineroars and Fake Outs and Grassy Glides and all your other priority. Like you could shut down Raging Bolt Thunderclaps and King Gambit, Sucker Punches, and yada yada. Just the list goes on. The Poison Barb is interesting, an
Yeah.
interesting choice, for sure there. So yeah, interesting team. You normally play them very early on, and it will always give you a run for your money if you like, especially with Perish Song Flutter like that.
It was a super fun match, and they played well. Like they played around the King Gambit very well, but then I just sort of had to adjust to that, and then I was able to close it out. So the next match I'm really excited to talk about. It's against Timbit, a boxer Timbits. She's a well-known Toronto player. Olivia, I got to know her a lot better over the course of the tournament because she was part of the building group that I was adjacent to that was running Gouging Fire. So we ended up playing the mirror. She was running the Rillaboom variant. And there's a really interesting thing with Gouging Fire in particular in this matchup. Because if you let a Gouging Fire run away in this matchup, it will go so far. Which is why a lot of Gouging Fires prioritize trying to go for the Terra Fairy because it lets them be immune to the opposing Gouging Fire's Breaking Swipe and also avoid the damage that you would take from said Breaking Swipe. But if you do that, you open yourself up to Burning Bulwark. So then that brings like a whole really interesting mind game. And on top of that, I was really happy about getting this play in game one. Is I got King Gambit switch in, calling out her Breaking Swipe, so I was able to give myself the boost, and then set up King Gambit to sort of take on the opposing Ogerpon, which is another easy bring to this matchup. Usually, I would say well, this applies to a ton of matchups, but Gouging Fire Ogerpon is just amazing here. And being able to play the mirror is really where spreads can come into play. When I first ran Gouging Fire, I wasn't running max speed, but some of my locals, including John Mark, he was running max speed, so I was consistently losing on the speed front of that, which I realized not too long after is like something I can't afford to do in this matchup. And playing all these mind games is really important. Like I ended up losing game 2 against Olivia because I let too many breaking swipes get through. But one thing I was really happy about in that matchup is, as much as I let too many breaking swipes get through, I also picked up her King Gambit for free because I called the switch. And it was really satisfying because I had that exact play done to me a week ago by John Mark. So like just playing him and getting sort of knowledge on the matchup really ended up coming out in this matchup, and I was really happy about how I played the mirror because I ended up getting those breaking swipe callouts. I ended up getting the King Gambit switching called out, and even though getting the King Gambit switch didn't win me that game 2, it still was a really good feeling to get. And in game 3, we just played that same game. I got a couple of speed ties in, and I was able to take it.
Yeah, and like getting that play in game 2 must have really pressured Timbit in game 3 to say, "Oh, I can't really make this play again." And it frees you up probably for a couple extra breaking swipes in there, and
Exactly.
limiting their damage in that way. It really makes your opponent second guess. Like, wow, they made this really great read in game 2 that could have really changed the course of the game. I can't freely make that switch anymore, trying to get that breaking swipe boost. So, yeah. 3-0 start is always the way you wanna start your day.
Yeah.
You'll love to see that, especially when you pull out a tough one in the mirror. Um, Round 4, you played Navjeet Joshi and his extremely interesting Screamtail team. If you
I
wanna talk
love
about
this
that.
squad so much. It's so NJ11. He's another Canada player and super nice guy, very fun to chat with. Um, Unfortunately, I never actually saw the Screamtail in the matchup,
Oh,
but
that's so unfortunate.
That is so sad.
but I love what he did with it because I asked him about it afterwards, and he was like, "Okay, Rock Tomb is there for the Gouging Fires, the Scarfish Foods, just to pave the way for Specs Flutter." And Rock Tomb just makes a lot of sense because it also does a little bit of super effective damage, and then it's the typical Encore Disable stuff that we see from Screamtail most of the time. And I thought that was just hilarious. I didn't realize that Screamtail got speed control like that, but it makes a ton of sense. The other thing that I didn't see but makes a lot of sense was the Terra bug on the Raging Bolt. Like, I remember another friend of mine was asking me, "Hey, why is that a thing? Why is Terra bug a thing?" And it makes a lot of sense for we saw it a couple of times on Heatran in past regulations, but it makes a ton of sense for Raging Bolt too. It's to get around the ground weakness, and in some cases still have a fighting resistance. So like the logic is there, and with Raging Bolt and Heatran, they both take fire moves pretty well outside of without Terra, so it's like not an issue for them to run Terra above most of the time. They just have to worry about rocks.
Yeah,
And
Carl was massive on the Terra bug Heatran. Specifically, you get that extra immunity in there, so that's always nice.
Yeah. But in any case, this matchup was pretty tough for me. They just led the typical Flutter Ogerpon stuff, and they were able to just position super well. The one observation that I did notice is that the Chien-Pao was adamant, which was a bit of a surprise. Which is another thing I ended up asking him about afterwards, and it was like, it's just there for the extra damage. And when you chunk Ogerpon for like 75%, yeah, that makes sense. That checks out. But yeah, this was definitely one of the most one-sided matches I had in day one. It was a pretty quick 2-0 for NJ, but yeah, it was a little unfortunate. I knew at some point in the run it was bound to happen, but he was a super cool guy, and it was a really cool squad. It was fun to talk about it after the match.
Yeah, I mean NJ is just like a juggernaut in the VGC scene. He's just been around for forever, it feels like, and sometimes just the experience levels and just being there, just knowing what's going on and playing a unique squad like this is it can really benefit a player. So I mean, if there's anyone that you're going to take a quick 2-0 loss to, like, I think you would want it to be NJ like that.
Yeah. And so yeah, the funny thing about the next mashup, my round 5 was against Nishant Joshi, and I look at the name and it's like, are they related? And
we
and-
talked about this last week.
Yeah.
and I heard from some of my friends who were there, it's like, oh yeah, you're fighting the brother. And it's like, okay. And I sit down with him and I ask him anyways, hey, are you guys related? And he's like, no, it's just a running joke that we're either the same person or we're related. We're running with it so much that I'm carrying a sweatshirt that's the same as
as
NJ, and it was just a funny little bit of banter that really is the jewel of going to these tournaments in person, is being able to meet up with these people, especially the ones that you may have heard or seen about online, and just being able to chat with them and get to know them a little bit more and figure out these inside jokes. And it's and of course maybe I'm being gaslit anyways, and they actually are related. Who knows?
So Angelo Rowe, our other host, is actually very close with Nishant, and he did confirm that you're not related. You were not being gaslit. But yeah, Giga's a long time just friend of ours. He was actually one of the first people that I met at Secaucus regionals as well.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, you ran the Joshi gauntlet. You went back to back, and Nishant's is also a fantastic player, but you managed to get the win against him. So you got your Joshi back, I guess.
Yeah. The one thing I sort of realized in this matchup is I believe there was a booster speed Icy Wind Flutter as opposed to the last one or the last two that were just specs. And one thing that I sort of went for and I got it that really helped the matchup, and realizing that I could reliably call that out in the tournament was realizing that people really like clicking Icy Wind Flutter against this team. And it's like, okay, I can work with this. I have a King Gambit. And today was that match was the first one where it came up. I did end up playing a little too unsafe with my own King Gambit. I ended up losing it to a Gleam Earth Power at some point in the the second game. But being able to reliably punish Icy Wind was something that was really important for getting that matchup going. And then eventually the late game came down to an Ogerpon versus Gouging Fire thing, which, I mean, without getting breaking swipes in, Ogerpon just wins it. You do have to worry about Heat Clash a little bit, but not in the position I was at. So I was able to grab that matchup. And again, it was a super fun game, and being able to sort of learn. The one thing I found in this tournament is I was sort of learning more and more as I went, and seeing that knowledge and that learning coming through both in the moment and in later games was a really satisfying experience. And then the next matchup comes in, where I take one of the other big lessons that I had over the tournament. Rapid Strike hurts. It hurts a lot.
Yeah, Surgery Strikes is not a fun move to take outside of Ogerpon.
And with the Scarf variant with U-turn, it's like, I think of a lot of what deterred it earlier on in the format was Ogerpon Wellspring's presence and being able to reliably keep the Surging Strikes away. But that's just one move in Rapid Strike's arsenal. So you have to learn to deal with the other stuff. And those who have been playing with Rapid Strike and playing in this format with the Ogerpon and the Raging Bolt just know how to do that super well, which is what Montana Mott did. He was able to play around against that super well. And the one thing that surprised me, which I didn't realize, is this team he was running, I think, originated somewhere from a Japan player, and it was running Sludge Bomb Amoonguss for the extra Sludge Bomb damage into the Ogerpons. And because I made the decision to Terra Gouging Fire in that first matchup, it actually chunked it for 50%, which is like, whoa, that is scary.
That's a lot of damage.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, Amoonguss has like a very, I guess, undercover attacking stat to where it actually does chunk stuff when it hits it super effectively.
Yeah. And it was just super tough because they led Urshifu Raging Bolt both times, and Raging Bolt actually does a lot in making sure that the stuff that would hit Urshifu doesn't hit Urshifu. So it makes a ton of sense why they're together on a team. They're both fantastic Pokemon in their own right. And together they're just terrifying. And yeah, that was my other quickest matchup of the day, and also my second loss of day one.
Yeah, how are you feeling after this loss? Like the pressure is obviously on you. You got to win out, through your next 3 games. I believe when I went to Hartford and I made day 2, it was a very similar type of situation where around round 6 or 7, I had gotten my second loss, and like I felt the pressure of being so close, but like also so far away. How are you feeling going, after this?
Honestly, I was pretty calm. Like going into Vancouver, I was not a believer in my team. Like I did not. I was like very skeptical on Gouging 5 because I felt like it was kind of losing some of its early format power. And for me, it was like, okay, I'm not too convinced, but also everything else I've tried hadn't felt a ton better, and this is just what I end up being the most comfortable with. So I'm just gonna run it and see how it goes. And at that point of the day, it was like, okay, I'm doing pretty strong. My goal for the day was to walk away with some points, whether it's playing the regional or even like the MSS that they always run on Sundays. Like I figured either way, so long as I can walk away with some points in the tournament, I'd be happy. So I was pretty calm, but I think part of what sort of distracted me at the time is one of my other friends traveling with us, Ruby. I she ended up placing, I think, not somewhere in the mid 90s at the end of the day. Um, some people might not like to hear this, but she is the best size spam player I've ever seen. People just don't like side spam as a whole.
She's one of those. Got it.
You have not played side spam until you've played her.
I love me some size spam.
She is a trick room specialist. She's Pocket Talk on YouTube. She's an up and coming YouTuber. So if anybody wants to check her out, there she is. And she had a much rougher start to the day. She had an absolute nightmare matchup round 1 because she's running side spam, she's running Sun, and she goes against a Weezing. Which, like, who's running Weezing at this point?
Stop! And you shall not pass.
And it just does a number on her team. And then the next round, she lost to like a ton of RNG. So even though she had sort of brought it back, I think at that time of the day, she was still. She was either X2 or X3, but because of how quick the matchup was and how my friend was kind of down on herself for not performing nearly as well as she had hoped, it gave us a good opportunity to sort of go to lunch, reset, and that was another like super important thing from a mental game, in that just having that moment to sort of take a step back, take stock of things, and also just do something that isn't VGC related, and being able to chat with friends. Like I think that's another very important difference, and why I recommend anybody who's interested in VGC to go to at least one regional to make some friends and have that group with you. Does wonders for your competitive mental.
Yep, 100%.
And that was sort of, even though I was a couple losses in through the day, I was able to just chat with people, enjoy the ride, because at the end of the day, there's only in the Pokemon world, there's only so many Elite Four. There's only an Elite Four, and then there's only a champion. There's a ton of trainers in the lore that just don't make it, but they can still get close. They can still do their best, and like we saw Ash take L's for 20 plus years before he got anywhere. And that's having that, realizing that sort of side of the locals grind, the regionals grind, you're kind of on that path in your own way, and making those memories and making those friends is the best way to sort of keep a mind mentally healthy.
Or you can be like me and absolutely drag down Carter's mental health at Knoxville.
I wouldn't say you dragged mine down. I was trying to do the opposite for you. You got in your own head. I'm like, all right, let's just enter Zen mode for a minute. You're like, nope, I'm already tilted. This is already ruined.
Like, it's over, folks.
It's just over.
Yeah, that was a learning experience for me. But you're right. In a couple of my tournaments, and Carter really came close to fixing me. But you couldn't fix.
I really tried, man.
You couldn't fix where I was at, and I was like, all right, I'm tapping out. It was like I had 2 early wins at Knoxville, and then I went 3 losses straight, and my last one was against a dozo, and I was like,
at that point, it's just over.
And then the other mental game stuff from outside of it was happening, and I was just like, all right, the house has crumbled, it is on the ground, it is broken. We can put the foundations and the stilts back up, but it's not happening again. We're not going to have the same house ever again. But yeah, you bounced back from that loss and did end up going on a tear through your 7, 8, and 9 matches. Getting 3 wins in a row.
Yeah, talk about Ruby is actually a good segue into the next matchup. But before we get into that, I want to acknowledge that after we had that lunch break, she went from what was probably, so that was round 5, right? She was either
6.
She was either X and 2 or X and 3 at that point of the day, and she brought it back to. She ended up finishing on 6-3 for the day, so she got her points, and then she turned it around. She turned it around next day, sweeping through the MSS, nearly undefeated. She only dropped 1 set, and she also got a big win against Brian Collins, the other well-known trick room user from some past regionals. So, and he was her hero, so she was absolutely buzzing at the end of that regionals experience, and she ended up walking away with more points than any of us. And talking about her is, as I said, was already a good segue into my next matchup, Patrick Chang, because he is another relatively well-known side spam one trick. Like I had heard of his name from Ruby and a couple of other of her side spam buddies, and I was looking at the matches like, okay, I know how Ruby plays. It's really rough if I can't call things right. But then another good product of being fortunate enough to have some really strong locals players to play against, like I already mentioned John Mark, and he's been to Worlds before. He's been playing since 2017, and then Ruby, she's been up and coming. She started about the same time I did, and a lot of us did in the Sword and Shield era. But she started taking PCs and MSSs left and right, and she's actually close to 400. So she's very much in sight for making it to Worlds this year. And we've had a couple of other former Worlds attendees amongst the Ontario locals. So we've got a lot of good players around here, and playing against Patrick, I was surprised at how calm and like how straightforward it seemed figuring out the matchup was relative to playing Ruby. Like it was a type of matchup where it's like, okay, you have the game plan of, well, the game plan either way is survive Trick Room, then win after that. With with uh, with the way the team can play, it can be very hard. It can be very hard to pull that off, even though it is what it is on paper. I actually would have 2-0'd if I hadn't missed a Sancio game one, but it was just being able to figure out, what you're gonna hit, what they're gonna hit in what slot, and then trying to play a little bit like as aggressive as you can, just sort of getting your pokes in and recognizing those opportunities. I'd had enough practice against the matchup that I could see those lines and was able to actually get some good hits in Trick Room and still live to tell the tale. There was actually one moment where I almost hard choked in the last game. So it was, I think, the second. Was it the second or the? Oh no, it was the last turn of Trick Room. I had Ogerpon Lando, and I already clicked Spiky Shield on Ogerpon the previous turn. So I was thinking, okay, there's the Ursaluna here, there's the Indeedee here. I can't Earth Power freely, so I probably want to Sanseer and just follow me to make sure that Lando stays safe, because I got the Tornadus in the back, I can Rain Dance, and guarantee pick up the Sanseer next turn, even if they miss. I accidentally clicked Spiky Shield.
Uh-oh.
Ogerpon was in my last slot, so I couldn't take it back. I was absolutely terrified, but Patrick does, I think, what is a standard follow me, like 50-50, in which case, do you click into the follow me mon just expecting you're going to follow me anyways because it's the right play to do? Or do you click into the mon you actually want to hit in the off chance that you hit it? And of course, depending on what the mon next to Ogerpon is, there's the whole protect thing. So it's a whole fork of decisions that you need to look at. And I just had to pray that he didn't pick the one that would win him the game and kill my Lando. Thankfully, he facades into the Ogerpon and I'm safe. So then Trick Room goes down. I have the Lando and the Tornadus comes in, and I have the guaranteed Sanseer KO to get the Ursaluna off the board, and then that's the matchup. So that was a moment in which I could have very easily killed my run on a big mistake, but thankfully it doesn't happen, and I'm safe.
You don't make day two without doing that at least once. In my Hartford run, it was 9th round, game 3, the final turn. I was facing down Torkoal and King Gambit with my Dragonite, and he had a sliver of health left, and I saw my Dragonite take a Kowtow Cleave Helping Hand and do 35%, and I was like, oh wow, I can easily take a Sucker Punch. I'm just gonna click Earthquake here, but I completely forgot that multi-scale was a thing.
Uh-oh.
I was like, Helping Hand Sucker Punch just loses me the game. I was literally head in hands. I was like, it's over, folks. This was a great run, but it's done because I'm an idiot. But then he was trying to read into my extreme speed, so he clicked Kowtow Cleave himself, hoping his King Gambit lived. So the Earthquake play ended up working out for me.
We take those.
We do take those. But yet, always note to everybody who's playing against Follow Me users, click into the Pokemon you want to take down. Do not click into the Follow Me user. Don't be silly. Don't force your opponent to make the play.
You want them to play around you, not to play around them.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yep.
And then after that, I was like, okay, that was a really scary matchup because I know what the team can do at the highest level. So I was feeling good. I was feeling recharged about that. And then And then I go into the next matchup against Tyler DC. And again, this is the most standard team I've seen in a while over the course of the day. Got the Willa Ogerpon with the Chien-Pao Dragonite. It's got grassy glides happening. It's got a lot of physical attacks happening. It's like a lot of things that that my team does as well. And but I also know that Gouging Fire goes super hard into this squad. Although the first game I do end up kind of lucking him out because my Lando ends up living the opposing Lando's Sludge Bomb on 3, which easily could have been a roll, but I actually don't remember what percentage I was at beforehand, but I did run a little bit of bulk into the Lando, so it could have been a call, it could have been a roll. Maybe the EV changed the roll a little bit, but whatever the case was, I end up living, and then I win the speed tie afterwards to pick up game 1, and then game 2 we both sort of adjust, try to figure things out. I end up losing it out, and then game 3 I end up just doing a quick lead change instead of leading Gouging Fire trying to be aggressive into a squad. I end up, taking a step back. I realized my Lando plus Torn, excuse me, my Lando plus Torn is just a lead that makes their Lando, which is very important to the matchup, just not be able to do much. So, and they had led Willa and Ogerpon both times previously, so it was like, okay, Sludge Bombs, Bleak Winds, all of that makes sense to being able to take it out. And that ends up being a really strong lead that puts me on the front foot. And the one mistake they made is that they ended up bringing their Ogerpon into the end game, which I realized since I had my Gouging Fire in the back, it's like Ogerpon loses that matchup because it's Hard Flame. And then since Terra was out of the way, that just sort of closed out the set. It was an interesting matchup, but I still that's another variation of Ogerpon that I've never really been into is that Hard Flame. Like, I see it and I see that it hurts, but Ogerpon Wellspring also hurts a ton, and it can do a lot on the support side, and the typing's fantastic. So that was just a thing. It was mostly playing around the grassy glides that was the most concerning thing about the matchup in terms of variations. And yeah, it was still like a very physical heavy match. So Gouging Fire. No other words required, just Gouging Fire.
Yeah, and, it's you were talking about how you don't really like Hearthflame. I'm in the opposite boat where I want to click the damage move. I want to get my +1 attack. Like, it's it's my personal favorite because, I of the player I am, I want to do the hyper offensive thing, right? And it's definitely of the 4 varieties, it's the hyper offensive version. Whereas like you have like Gouging Fire here to be able to like howl to then get you that damage boost that I'm having to force myself to Terra to be able to get, right? So like you are still able to do it, but in a more like roundabout way, but also in a more like defensive way as well.
Yeah.
So,
and I think that just speaks to the difference of how we play the game.
100%. I'm not saying one is better than the other, but one of us has a day 2 in a regional to our name, and the other is me. So
you can do it, I believe. Anyways, my round 9, the final match of the day, was against Kimo Nishimura, with a Volcarona squad, which is something that I remember seeing. I remember like, okay, I should account for this because it's been popping up enough, and it seems solid. It's it's they run the quiver dance build. They run it on balance, and they usually go with as you can see on his squad is the fake out bros, raging bold, rapid strike Urshifu. All stuff that you've seen before with a little bit of spice with the Volcarona. Um, I end up seeing the pressure that Rapid Strike Urshifu exerts once again. I I think in hindsight I was definitely out of practice in that matchup because Urshifu Rapid Strike itself has been taking a step back, but now he's here again. But then game two, I sort of adjust. I realize Lando Torn puts a lot of pressure, and they end up leading. They end up switching the lead. So the first lead of the game was the Urshifu Bolt, the same thing that Montana Mott ran through my team with. But in game two, I decided, okay, how do I do this? I know that Lando Cal from earlier in the day, so maybe if I lead Lando Torn, I can fish for that and see how it goes. They lead Instant Volcarona this time, and it's like, okay, that's so much more free. So I'm gonna click my Sanseers. I'm gonna get Rain up. I'm gonna get my Bleak Winds in, and I don't end up showing my last two slots for that game too, which was huge. Game three, however, was the one I felt the most bad for because I realized, okay, that lead worked out well. I should try to think about what he does to counter it, and I was thinking, okay, Pow would probably be a good idea, which he hadn't brought previously. The Raging Bolt could come in, and it's like, okay, if those two come in and they like hard lead against what I put in, which is a very strong possibility, I could be in trouble. So I'll just I'll set up that lead because I know it's good, and then I'll try to set up my back row a little bit to try to compensate for it. They lead exactly that, and it's a very good call. And again, hindsight is 2020. I probably could have gone back to like say a gouging fire based lead to face that better, but I didn't, and they ended up getting a bit of a lead. But it's like, okay, that kind of sucked, but I still obviously got to play it out. It's not over yet, and the game comes down to my Chien Pao versus their Raging Bolt. I'm down to Sash. They're at about 40%, and they've got the Terra. I'm looking at this, and it's like, there is no conceivable way I get out of this. I look at the squad as like, yeah, I mean, you just click Thunderclap, and you're safe. Even if I do click Sucker Punch to cover for it, I highly doubt that it's going to be enough. I quit the Sucker Punch. It gets from 40% to like 10 to 15. I'm looking at this like, do I have a win con here? And it's like, and even right there, it's tricky because the crit came in, I'm not sure if it's actually gonna pick up. And I don't remember. I don't know if you guys have the team sheet up as we're going, but
Mm-hmm.
the Raging Bolt, was it the AV variant or was it the Calm Mind variant?
Oh, let me find it.
Maybe I can find it. Let's see.
Yeah, I'm struggling to find it.
Let's see.
Because that brings up another big mind game when it comes to comes to this kind of stuff. Because if they were the calm mind build, then they had a much safer line and just sort of realizing I have no other options but to click Sucker Punch. But especially if they were running the Protect build, they have a lot more options in terms of finding their way out of it.
They were Life Orb, Thunderbolt, Draco Meteor, Thunderclap, Protect.
Okay. Yeah, okay, so it's a little bit less. That's actually a surprisingly aggressive build. Yeah, they still had the options of just sort of Protect stalling, because then it's another case of you want to try to force your opponent to play around you rather than playing around them. And I think playing those Sucker Punch mind games further against a Thunderclap would have been their out. But maybe they're just reeling from the crit, but they end up trying to Thunderclap me again, try to close it out, because it's a safe option, and it's an option that makes me either have to take a chance on a Sucker Punch again, or I have to read into the Protect. Even reading into the Protect would be weird, because they would, for me, if they start protecting, then I have to take into account, my only option is sort of either hoping that they go aggressive at some point and giving me the Sucker Punch, or I try to read a double Protect in their attempt to stall out the Sucker Punch, which ends up being a whole weird thing in and of itself. But we both pick the least mental work option, and we both pick our priority moves. And then the Sucker Punch picks up, which I don't think it would have happened without the crit before it. So it was one I genuinely felt bad about, especially since it was our winning inning. And yeah, and then I respectfully wait for him to leave before I pop off.
Nothing but the most respect from Kuriboh.
And yeah, that was the end of day one. I was able to celebrate with my friends. Jean-Marc had already nearly gotten his world invite just from day 2 and on its own.
Mm-hmm.
And he definitely got it from placing 9th in the tournament. So he's on his track to Hawaii. He just needs to figure out how to get there.
And when it's going to be, that's the other thing.
Yes, that's another thing that we were talking about, is like World's invite, not World's invite, World's date when? And we're also super happy to hear that Ruby was able to rally and make it to a 6-3, which got net her some points. And then we were able to sort of take the night off, enjoy Vancouver, and recharge and get ready for day 2. And
Which
then day 2 comes. So
yeah.
The one thing that that was kind of an interesting sort of remark I noticed on day 2 is, one, it's a lot more quiet in the venue because not nearly as many people hang around. Some people, after getting their performance in, they'll mill around, they'll hang around a bit, but a lot of them take the time to explore the city and said, oh, actually, as a side note, for those who may not know, Vancouver is Canada's most common city as far as movie and TV studios go to shoot.
Mm-hmm. I did know that.
And on the way back to the Airbnb after getting dinner, we noticed a couple of blocks just sort of blocked off. People were still allowed to walk by, but the streets themselves were blocked off, and we saw this super weird motorcycle going by with a bunch of different light panels on it. We were talking with Olivia the next day, just saying, oh, hey, we saw this and it looked really weird but super cool. And there are also like cars in the middle of the street just sort of parked parked in weird spots to make it probably seem like the motorcycle was like driving around them, as if probably to simulate actual motion.
Kuriboh walked onto a movie set.
Basically, we did.
Moral of the story.
Yeah, we did it. We did it, and it was super cool. And we were talking with her, and it's like, oh, that must have been Tron, because I'm a big Tron fan, and I know they're shooting at the time. I'm so jealous you guys walked past that and had no idea what it was.
Actually sick. That is so cool.
Just
Yeah,
casually walking onto the Tron movie set. That's so funny.
Yeah, it was pretty cool, and like
keep your eyes out for the Kuriboh cameo.
Yeah, last year I was around. I stayed a little bit longer in Vancouver, and my sister was there with me, and we found a TV and movies tours. So the tour guide basically had an iPad with him, and he would show us clips from different places in the area where they were doing shooting. Like as an early 2000s Disney Channel kid, the Fairmont there was used as like the front facade for the Sweet Life of Zack and Cody, which was another really cool thing. It's just for like the panning shot in the title sequence, not for any of the actual shooting or anything. But that was another cool thing that I remembered as a fact to point out to my friends, and we just happened to pass by it. And like I remember the year before on the tour guide on the tour, some of the other people who paid for the tour as well remarked on seeing like a Metropolis PD vehicle at some point or another, because they were shooting Superman and Lois over there too.
Huh. Okay.
So there's a lot of like neat little movie things. Anyways, that was an anecdote. I know everybody's here for Pokemon, but that was.
I mean, I appreciate it.
I also appreciate it. I think maybe we can talk a little bit more like generally about day 2. Maybe not get as much into like the weeds and the matchups or anything like that. Just like the overall vibe of it, how the day went, things like that. It wasn't the best day in terms of Pokemon for you, but I'm sure it was a great experience nonetheless.
Yeah, I was still riding off just being there in the first place, so
Yeah.
I still left the day happy, but as the day turned out, like as I previously mentioned, the stuff about Rapid Strike Urshifu, I definitely felt it a lot more in day 2, because you just have a higher caliber of players. They know what they're doing, and even that Earth Power calc I mentioned about earlier in day 1, it came up immediately in the very first matchup of the day against Ale, and I in game 1 I do that Earth Power play, just get a feel for it, see if it works. If it works, great. If it doesn't, then it's something I have to remember. And it didn't work because they lived on probably about 5%, which I did the calcs. It does take like a significant amount of investment to pull that off. So like, okay, props to you. I got the information, but you got the dub. Let's try to work with it. I learned that the bolt is slow enough that King Gambit outsped it. But of course I was under Tailwind, so it was sort of like a note that I made at first, and it's like, oh wait, that's why it outsped, and it just sort of, it was still something I couldn't really come back with, and he ended up getting a good call. I think it was a close combat into the King Gambit switch, which was absolutely devastating, and yeah, that was just sort of that's another thing about Urshifu Rapid Strike is in the time I played it, like 90% of the time I click Surging Strikes because it's Surging Strikes, it's amazing. But learning how to use Urshifu's other moves, I think is a separation between a good Urshifu player and a great Urshifu player. And yeah, that was sort of coming out in the day, and then the next round it was like, overall, I think one thing that I ended up possibly getting too confident about over the course of the tournament was trying to read too much, which is not something I'm used to. I in locals, I'm used to being the one getting read because I'm playing too safe. But but in playing around with King Gambit, especially, I was sort of learning how to get callouts on people, and I was getting a little too confident in that. The second day, there were definitely some reads that got punished harder, which is just the nature of having stronger players to play against. But also, I felt like I was forced to take more chances with Bleak Winds and Sandseals, and that's something that I think cost me some games. I did end up getting a couple more Icy Wind callouts. Like that didn't change in Top Cut. You could still very reliably call out Icy Wind Flutters and get the King Gambit punish off of that. I ended up keep playing around. The matchup that kind of left me scratching my head the most was my first and only Blood Moon matchup of the entire tournament. And they lead instant photograph. This was like my round 13 or 14, I think. And anyway, they lead instant photograph and it's like, okay, Trick Room's got to go up here, right? And I think I had the King Gambit. Yeah, I led Gouging King Gambit because King Gambit as a whole can either pressure the photograph really hard or put in some work against the Blood Moon when it comes in. And they don't click Trick Room. And it's like, okay, I don't get it, but I'll take it. Maybe he's playing into his fast mode later on. But as I see the rest of his mounts come in, he had the Blood Moon, he had, I think it was a single strike Urshifu, and it's like, okay, you definitely set that game plan up for a Trick Room play. Why didn't you go for it? Turns out he was too scared of the King Gambit. But then it's like, okay, that's actually just makes it way easier for me, so I'm going to run with it. And then the next one is like, okay, he might play a little bit. He might play to not hit the King Gambit, or he might try to play around the King Gambit a little bit more. So I'm going to lead Lando to him. Doesn't seem like the best idea against a Trick Room matchup, but we'll see how it goes. He leads Urshifu Flutter, and he ends up just not going for Trick Room, which made the matchup like way easier for me. And then my final match of the day was actually the most painful because one, it was like, okay, I know I've lost today. I know I've lost a lot today. I'm not going to top cut, but if out of the 36 of us who day two'd, if I could do better than some of the worst performing people in here, then I can make top 32, get an extra 10 CP, and it's nice to say top 32. In the last game, I play absolutely as well as I can. Game one, I have the world champ, not the world champ, the world runner-up experience of getting spoiled by everything.
Yeah.
Everything's asleep. Everything gets full turn sleep, and it's just rough. So I realized, okay, I need to respect the Amoonguss more. I'm going to bring Torn. I take game two that way. It works out really well. So I stick with that game plan going into game three. And I take a good trade. I lead well with the Ogerpon. I'm able to hit the Urshifu hard enough that I take it down. But then there's enough chip going through that the Amoonguss, and it's another Sludge Bomb Amoonguss, gets a big Sludge Bomb into my Ogerpon, but I live on one. And I'm thinking like, okay, this is huge. I can run with this. It's going to be amazing for the rest of this matchup. Poison procs.
Uh-oh.
And it's like, okay, that sucks, but I can still work with this. I keep going. I keep playing it out. It comes down to, I think it was King Gambit Tornadus versus a lone Fluttermane. I'm thinking, okay, I can chip it down with Sucker Punch, and then the Bleak Wind should just pick it up. The Bleak Wind does not pick it up; it just straight misses.
Uh-oh.
And it was at like 40%, so like a single target probably should have done it. But that's my run. Like I ended up losing it to a Sludge Bomb Poison plus Bleak Wind miss, which might be karma for getting my winning in off of the Sucker Punch, but it still hurt.
Yeah,
it hurt so much.
Obviously, it was in the writing for the day. The script writers had it all already. It's exactly how they wrote it up.
Yep.
You know,
you were just written out of the movie.
Just the extra. Anyways, that was sort of the end of the day, and then it would. Even then, like I was still riding off of like both me and our group doing so well in the tournament that I was still able to just sort of hang around and enjoy the rest of the day. I wandered around the booth. I spent way too much money on cards, and
would you pick up anything cool?
I got this really nice full art Suicune V.
Okay. Yeah.
That was a super nice pickup. As of like a couple months ago, I actually started getting into the card game because some of my high school friends were like, "Hey, we're collecting again. Why don't you come with us to one of the stores and you can open packs with us?" And then the term cardboard crack really started.
Yeah.
To make sense.
Yeah.
And so I started to play TCG Online and was honestly surprised at how easy it was. It seemed to pick up, so I started playing with it, and so I was picking up a couple of cards for post rotation, and I even when they opened up the venue on the Friday, there was a lineup outside because I don't know, people really want to get in as soon as possible on the noon to either get their stuff, the welcome packages or whatever, and get first crack at all the booths. And I ended up making a friend with a guy who was there for TCG, and it was really fun. He was playing an all Reggie deck, which I don't know if you've ever seen online, but there is synergy there. Basically, Reggie Gigas lets you pull energies from the deck, but only if
you have your
all the other
Reggies,
Reggies
right?
are present.
Yeah, actually, at Knoxville, wasn't Manny training with that a little bit? He had brought that deck and was practicing against Tiff with it. Yeah, I remember that for some reason. But yeah, I had the cardboard crack addiction for a little while, and then I started not pulling stuff from boxes, and it all went to shit. Now I got
you just buy singles to keep it going.
Yeah, now I got the plastic block addiction, as you can see behind me.
We so it was last weekend. TCG player had like a kickback on sealed product, and my roommate has been into cracking like the 25th anniversary Yu-Gi-Oh set.
Oh, okay.
So I'm like, I could spend $50 and buy a box of Yu-Gi-Oh. So I bought a box of Spell Ruler. He bought a box of Pharaoh Servant. And so they actually both came in last night, and so we just sat around for an hour or whatever cracking packs. It was the first thing I've opened in a long time, and I'm just like, I see it. I completely understand why I'm addicted to this because this is nothing but pure nostalgia. I have no interest in playing the game, but I just like knowing that like these are all cards I've played with in my history of like playing the game.
And then you open packs for like a half an hour, and then you realize you just spent like $100 on something that took 30 minutes to open. And it's like, dang, why did I do this?
And meanwhile, I have a binder coming in from Amazon just to put my stuff in.
We love
Hmm.
that. Well, with that, I think we are just about all done over here. Unless Carter, Kuriboh, you guys got anything else for us that you want to get into, or
I think overall, anybody who's thinking about getting into it, thinking about getting into the tournaments, I absolutely recommend going at least to a regionals. Um, as you guys know, I got my start right here in Littleroot, and that's kind of where it spun off from. And it took 4 years, but I'm here, and I never expected to get as far as I did in Vancouver. I was hoping to get points, but especially since locals opened up closer to me a lot more after all the madness that was the pandemic. I am still very much on track for Worlds, and I'm hoping maybe next time I talk to you, it's because I do well there. We'll
For
see.
sure. For
we
sure.
are certainly rooting for you. You're the number one in our hearts. Do you have any shout outs or plugs that you want to drop for us quick?
If anybody wants to find me, I'm kind of a ghost online. There is
You
a
can
neat
find him in
little
the LRL Discord.
there's a neat little place that you guys can go if you really want to try to find me, and it's there. Um, I I'll shout out John Mark. He's John Cena on Twitter, and and
It's
I know
John Cena!
and I know he's really on the content grind. He's talking about after this world run, after like almost 8 years of being in competitive, he wants to take a step back. He's been telling us about the YouTube channel he wants to start and all the editing he's been doing, and it's going to be like a VGC story time channel, and I think it's a really cool concept. And I've seen some of the stuff he's been throwing together for it, and I'm really looking forward to what he's doing. So keep an eye on his Twitter, and hopefully he'll be putting that out. He said since he's got a world fire down, he's going to be putting the time towards getting that content out. So shout outs to him, especially since he's a great player, a great friend, and definitely, I think it's got some niche content. I think a lot of people are going to like it. And then, of course, shout out to my other local friend Ruby. Also, she's been coming up with Pocket Talk on YouTube, and if you have any interest in Trick Room, she is an amazing Trick Room player, and an amazing player overall, and a great person. So, not shouting out myself, but they both have content coming, and yeah, they're just nice people.
Well, as someone who just drafted Trick Room Size Spam for UDL, I'm going to have to go and check out Ruby's channel for sure. With that, Josh, thank you so much for coming on the channel.
Thanks for having me. It's been a fun time.
It's been a long time coming, and we know you've been on the grind and really putting in the work, and we're so happy to see you do so well in this tournament. Making a day 2 is no joke. It's really freaking difficult, and we're just so proud to have another LRL person go on to do great things in the game. So just fantastic, really well done, great run, and I'm happy to see Gouging Fire did so well for you because
Goating Fire,
Gouging Goating Fire. With that, thank you so much for watching, everyone. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, all the fun YouTube stuff. Check us out on Twitter at Littleroot Lessons. Come and hang out in the community Discord where you can hang out with me, Carter, Ro, and of course Kuriboh.
Mainly Kuriboh.
Mainly Kuriboh. Make sure you go and check out the supporters links for both Discord and Patreon. And shout out to Johnny Bravo Sr. and Papa Swish for your support on Patreon, and Smeargle for your support on Discord. With that has been this interview with our good friend Kuriboh, and we will see you all next time. See ya.
Bye, guys.